Bimbo was the kind of person everyone loved to be around. She had a heart as pure as gold and a smile that could light up even the darkest room. People often say that her beauty was unmatched, but it wasn't just her looks that made her special. It was her kindness, her gentle spirit, and the way she treated everyone with respect and love. She was from a humble family, but her charm and grace made her stand out among the richest and most privileged. Bimbo had a best friend named Tolani. They were inseparable, like two peas in a pod. Wherever Bimbo went, Tolani wasn't far behind. They met at the university where they were roommates, and from that moment on, their bond grew stronger every day, even after their graduation. They shared everything from their deepest secrets to their dreams for the future. People often joked that Bimbo and Tolani were like sisters, and in many ways, they were. One day, Bimbo's life took a turn she never expected. It was a bright Sunday afternoon when she decided to visit the mall for some shopping. She needed a few things for the week, and the mall seemed like the perfect place to relax and browse around. As she wandered through the stores, her mind was lost in thoughts of what to buy next. In another part of the mall, there was a young and handsome man named Wale who was also out shopping. He had just returned home from abroad and needed to pick up some clothes and supplies. The mall was busy, filled with people moving in every direction, but he didn't mind. It was good to be back home, he thought, as he admired how much the city had grown since he had left. It wasn't long before their paths crossed. Bimbo, focused on searching out her next item, accidentally bumped into Wale. Her basket slipped from her grip, scattering her new purchases on the floor. "I'm so sorry," she said, bending down quickly to gather her things. "Let me help you," came a calm voice from above her. Bimbo looked up and met the warm gaze of a young man. From the moment their eyes met, something magical happened. It was as if the world around them disappeared, and for a brief moment, it was just the two of them. Wale was handsome, with a warm smile that made Bimbo's heart skip a beat. He had a gentle smile on his face, and for a moment, she forgot about the scattered things on the floor. His presence was magnetic, and something about the way he looked at her made her heart race. "Thank you," she managed to say, feeling slightly embarrassed as they both crouched to pick up her belongings. As they stood up, their hands brushed, and Bimbo felt a spark. She looked at him again, really taking him in this time. He was tall, with a strong build, and there was an air of quiet confidence around him. But what struck her the most was the kindness in his eyes. Wale," he said, handing her the last of her items. "I didn't mean to bump into you." "No, it's my fault," she replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I wasn't paying attention. I'm Bimbo." They stood there for a moment, neither of them sure of what to say next, but neither wanting to leave just yet. The noise of the busy mall seemed to fade as they looked at each other, an invisible connection forming between them. "Are you here often?" Wale asked, trying to keep the conversation going. He wasn't sure why, but he didn't want this meeting to end so quickly. "Sometimes," Bimbo said with a small smile. "I like to shop here when I get the chance. What about you?" "I just got back to Nigeria 2 days ago," Wale said. "I've been living abroad for a while. I'm still getting used to things." "Oh, I see," Bimbo said, nothing. She didn't usually talk to strangers like this, but there was something about Wale that made her feel comfortable. "How has it been so far?" "It's been good," he replied. "Different, but good. I'm happy to be home." Bimbo smiled, feeling a strange sense of excitement. She didn't know what it was, but meeting Wale felt important somehow. I guess I should let you finish your shopping, Wale said after a brief pause, though he didn't seem eager to leave. Yeah, I should probably go too, Bimbo replied, though she felt the same reluctance. As she turned to leave, Wale quickly added, maybe we see each other around. Bimbo glanced back, her heart skipping a beat. Maybe, she said, her smile widening slightly. They exchanged contacts and parted ways, but as Bimbo walked away, she couldn't help but feel like something had changed. Meeting Wale had brought a strange, hopeful feeling she hadn't expected. Wale also felt a sense of anticipation as he continued his shopping. There was something about Bimbo that stayed with him, and he hoped fate had brought them together for good. Later that evening, as Bimbo sat on her bed, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Wale. Hi Bimbo, it's Wale. I hope you got home safely. Bimbo smiled as she read the message. Her heart fluttering, she typed back a quick response. Hi Wale. Yes, I did. Thank you. Hope you did too. Moments later, her phone rang. It was Wale calling. For a second, Bimbo hesitated, her heart racing as she stared at the screen. Then, with a deep breath, she answered, Hello. Hey Bimbo. Wale's deep voice came through the phone, smooth and warm, just like she remembered from the mall. I figured texting wouldn't be enough. I wanted to hear your voice. Bimbo couldn't help but smile. Well, here it is, she teased lightly, feeling her nerves ease up as they both laughed. How is your evening going? Wale asked, his tone relaxed, as though they had known each other for years instead of just a few hours. It's been good, just resting after the mall. What about you? She replied, leaning back against her pillows, feeling more comfortable as the conversation flowed. I'm alright, Wale said, though I keep thinking about how we met today. It was unexpected. It really was, Bimbo agreed, laughing softly. I wasn't planning to bump into anyone, especially not like that. Well, I'm glad it happened, Wale admitted, his voice soft but sincere. I couldn't stop thinking about you after we said goodbye. Bimbo felt a warm blush rise to her cheeks, her heart fluttering again. She wasn't used to someone being so open about their feelings, but it didn't feel forced or awkward with Wale. It felt real. I thought about you too, she said, her voice quieter now. There was a brief pause on the line, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt as if they were both just letting the moment sink in, the reality of this new connection they were building. So, Bimbo, Wale said, his voice taking on a playful note, tell me more about yourself. What do you like to do when you are not bumping into strangers at the mall? Bimbo laughed, enjoying the lightness in his voice. Well, I don't spend all my time shopping, if that's what you're asking. She joked. They both smiled. What about you? She asked. You said you just got back from abroad. What were you doing there? I was studying business management in the UK, Wale explained. But now that I'm back, I'll be helping with my family's company. Wow, Bimbo said, impressed. That would be a lot of responsibility. Yes, Wale admitted. They continued talking for what felt like hours, sharing stories about their lives, their families, and their dreams for the future. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and moments of quiet reflection. With each passing minute, Bimbo felt herself growing more comfortable with Wale, as if they had known each other for much longer than just a day. As the night deepened, Wale's voice softened. I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. Bimbo, he said, I haven't connected with someone like this in a long time. Me too, Bimbo replied, her voice just as soft. I didn't expect to meet someone like you today, but I'm glad I did. I would like to see you again, Wale said, a hopeful tone in his voice. Maybe we can go for dinner sometime? I would like that, Bimbo said, smiling to herself. They said their goodbyes, but neither of them could stop smiling after the call ended. As Bimbo placed her phone down beside her, She felt a sense of excitement bubbling up inside her. This was the beginning of something special. She could feel it. When Tolani finally returned to the city after a few weeks away, Bimbo was bubbling with excitement. She could hardly wait to tell her best friend everything about Wale, their long phone calls, the way he made her laugh, and the plans they were always making for the future. Bimbo had never felt like this before, and she was certain Tolani would share in her joy. Tolani, for her part, was thrilled for Bimbo. Over the phone, Bimbo had mentioned Wale several times, but now, seeing her best friend so happy in person made it all real. She had always hoped Bimbo would find someone who treated her well, and it seemed like Wale was that man. Now that Tolani was back, Bimbo couldn't wait to introduce her best friend to the man who had captured her heart. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and Tolani was lounging on Bimbo's couch, catching up on all the latest happening. Bimbo, as usual, was full of stories, but this time, all the stories centered around one person, Wale. I'm telling you, Tola, he's different. He's not like anyone I've met before, Bimbo said, her eyes sparkling with happiness as she spoke about him. Tolani smiled, happy to see her best friend so in love. I can see that you've been glowing since I got back. I can't wait to meet this Wale and see what all the fuss is about, she teased. Oh, you will meet him soon, Bimbo replied with a grin. In fact, he's coming over today. Just as she said those words, the doorbell rang. That must be him, Bimbo said, jumping up from the couch. Tolani smiled and shifted in her seat, curious and eager to finally meet this man who had stolen her best friend's heart. But as Bimbo opened the door and called out, Wale, come in, Tolani froze. A tall, familiar figure stepped into the room. His build, his walk, it couldn't be. But it was. Wale, her Wale, the Wale she had grown up with, the one who had been her childhood friend, her secret crush, the one she had spent countless afternoons dreaming about as a teenager. And now, here he was, walking into the room, smiling at Bimbo, completely unaware of the shock coursing through Tolani's veins. Wale, this is my best friend Tolani, Bimbo said, her voice filled with pride and excitement. Tola, this is Wale. Tolani's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt her mouth go dry as Wale turned to her, his warm smile widening as he stretched out his hand. Tola, wow, it's been a long time, Wale said, surprised but clearly happy to see her. I didn't know you were Bimbo's best friend. Small world. Tolani forced a smile, her mind racing to process the situation. She shook his hand slowly, her thoughts swelling. Yeah, it's been a while, she managed to say, trying to keep her voice steady. I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect it either. Wale chuckled, glancing at Bimbo with a fond look in his eyes. But I guess fate has a way of bringing people together. Bimbo, completely unaware of the silent tension in the room, laughed. I knew you two would get along. You both mean so much to me. Tolani's stomach twisted at the words. Though she kept her smile in place, she watched as Bimbo led Wale further into the living room, chatting and laughing with him as if everything were perfect. To Bimbo, everything was perfect, but to Tolani, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She watched them closely, the way Wale looked at Bimbo, the way Bimbo's face lit up whenever she spoke to him. There was no denying it. They were in love. The realization hit her like a wave, a mixture of joy for her friend and an old lingering heartache she had never truly let go of. Tolani had never told Bimbo about her childhood feelings for Wale. Back then, she had kept it to herself, unsure of how to express it and scared of ruining their friendship. By the time Wale had moved abroad, those feelings had faded into the background, buried beneath the busyness of life. But now, seeing him again, those old emotions stirred inside her, confusing and painful. Yet, as she watched them together, something else rose inside her. Gratitude. Gratitude that Bimbo had found someone who clearly cherished her, someone who made her truly happy. Tolani could see the love in Wale's eyes every time he looked at Bimbo, and she knew this wasn't just a fleeting romance, this was real. After a few minutes of catching up, Bimbo excused herself to grab some drinks from the kitchen, leaving Wale and Tolani alone in an awkward silence. Wale shifted, glancing at her. This must be a bit of shock, huh? You could say that, Tolani replied, her voice softer now. I didn't expect this. I didn't either, Wale admitted, his tone genuine. But Bimbo, she's incredible. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Tolani nodded, her heart heavy but understanding. She is, she said quietly. She's the best person I know. Wale smiled, a soft look crossing his face. I'm really lucky to have met her. Tolani took a deep breath, pushing her own feelings aside. She knew what she had to do. Just promise me you will take care of her, Wale, she said, her voice firm despite the emotions swelling inside her. She deserves the best. Wale met her eyes and nodded, his expression serious. I will, I promise. When Bimbo returned with the drinks, she found the two of them laughing over old memories from their childhood, and the tension in the room had eased. Tolani had made peace with what had happened, knowing that Bimbo's happiness came first. As the afternoon wore on, Tolani watched her best friend laugh and talk with Wale, and though a part of her heart still ached, she knew she had made the right choice. This was Bimbo's fairy tale, and no matter what, she would be there to support her, just as she always had. Bimbo and Wale continued to grow in love, but there was one problem. Wale's mother, Mrs. Adesua. Mrs. Adesua, who didn't approve their relationship. Wale's family was very wealthy, and his mother had always dreamed of her son marrying someone from a similar background. She had her heart set on Tolani, who had grown up with Wale. Their families were close, and Mrs. Adesua had always believed that Wale and Tolani would one day get married. Tolani too had feelings for Wale, even though Wale had never seen her as more than a friend. Mrs. Adesua was not happy when she learned that Wale had chosen Bimbo over Tolani. In her eyes, Bimbo was nothing more than a gold digger, someone who was after Wale's money and status. She couldn't understand why her son would choose a girl from a humble background when there were so many other women who came from wealthy families like theirs. You will not marry that girl under my watch, Mrs. Adesua said sternly when Wale brought Bimbo home to introduce her. Didn't you see girls of your caliber? How dare you bring home a gold digger with no family history? Who is her father? Wale tried to calm his mother, explaining that his love for Bimbo had nothing to do with money or status. Mother, he said gently, Bimbo is the kindest, most genuine person I've ever met. I love her for who she is, not for what she has. Please, try to understand. After much persuasion, Mrs. Adesua seemed to soften. She pretended to accept Bimbo, acting friendly towards her as if she had finally given her blessing. Bimbo, unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes, was overjoyed. She believed that Wale's mother had come to love her, and she threw herself into the wedding preparations with excitement. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with joy and laughter. Bimbo and Tolani spent hours together, picking out dresses, choosing decorations, and planning every details of the ceremony. Tolani, despite her hidden feelings for Wale, seemed to support the union wholeheartedly. She smiled and laughed with Bimbo, all the while hiding the pain in her heart. As the wedding day drew closer, Bimbo couldn't contain her happiness. She was marrying the man of her dreams, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world. Little did she know that this day, which was supposed to be the happiest of her life, would soon turn into a nightmare. The day of the wedding finally arrived. The sun shone brightly and the air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers. The environment was buzzing with excitement as everyone gathered to witness the union of Bimbo and Wale. The ceremony was beautiful, with beautiful music playing softly in the background as Bimbo walked down the aisle in her stunning white dress. Wale stood at the altar, beaming with pride as he watched his bride approach. But just as they were about to exchange their vows, something strange began to happen. Bimbo, who had been standing calmly beside Wale, suddenly started to fidget. At first, it was just a slight discomfort. She reached down and took off her shoes, thinking they were pinching her feet. But then she began to undo her veil, pulling it off her head and letting it fall to the ground. The guests watched in confusion, whispering amongst themselves. What is she doing? Someone muttered. Before anyone could stop her, Bimbo started to laugh. A high, wide laugh that echoed through the church. Her laughter grew louder and more hysterical until it filled the entire room. The guests looked on in shock as Bimbo began to spin around, tearing at her dress and flinging the pieces to the floor. Her eyes were wide and unfocused as it was clear that something was terribly wrong. Wale rushed to her side, trying to calm her down, but Bimbo didn't seem to recognize him. She pushed him away, her laughter turning into sobs as she collapsed to the ground. Her mother ran forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter, but Bimbo continued to struggle, screaming and crying as if possessed by some unseen force. The ceremony was quickly halted, and Wale, along with Bimbo's mother, hurriedly took her home. They locked her in a room, hoping that whatever was happening would pass. But Bimbo's condition only worsened. She paced back and forth, talking to herself and laughing at nothing. Her eyes darted around the room, seeing things that weren't there, and she refused to eat or sleep. Bimbo's mother was filled with worry. She knew that something was terribly wrong, but she didn't know what to do. She couldn't bear to see her only child in such a state, and she began to suspect that there was more to this. She felt it wasn't ordinary. Her heart told her that this wasn't just a case of nerves or stress. Something evil was at play. Desperate for answers, Bimbo's mother began visiting spiritual houses, seeking help from traditional healers and diviners. She went from one place to another, but no one could give her a clear answer. Some said that Bimbo had been cursed, while others believed that she had been possessed by a spirit. But none of the remedies they offered seemed to work, and Bimbo's condition remained the same. It wasn't until she visited a well known diviner in a village that the truth began to come to light. The old man, with a long white beard and wise eyes, listened carefully as Bimbo's mother explained what had happened. He sat quietly for a moment, his eyes closed as if in deep thought, and then he spoke. Your daughter's condition is not natural, he said in a low, serious voice. Someone close to her has done this to her. Someone she trusts. You must think carefully who in your life could harbor such jealousy or hatred towards Bimbo. Bimbo's mother was stunned. The idea that someone close to her daughter could be responsible for this madness was almost too much to bear. But as she thought about it, one name kept coming to mind: Tolani. Tolani, who had been Bimbo's closest friend, her confidant, the one person she had trusted above all others. Could it be that Tolani was behind this? The thought made her sick to her stomach, but she knew she had to find out the truth. She went to Wale and told him everything the diviner had said. Wale was shocked, but determined to get to the bottom of it. Together, they decided to confront Tolani and find out what she knew. They went to Tolani's house, their hearts heavy with suspicion and fear. When they arrived, Tolani greeted them with a warm smile, acting as if nothing was wrong. But as soon as they started questioning her, her demeanor changed. She became defensive, denying any involvement in Bimbo's condition. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice trembling. I would never hurt Bimbo. She's my best friend. But the more they pressed her, the more her facade began to crack. Finally, under the weight of their accusations, Tolani broke down and confessed. She revealed that Wale's mother had given her something to rub on Bimbo's wedding gown, claiming it was for her protection. Many people attend weddings to cause harm to the bride. Mrs. Adesua had told her this will protect Bimbo from evil eyes and bad intentions. But don't tell her. It will work better if she doesn't know. Tolani had believed Wale's mother. She had always trusted Mrs. Adesua, who had been like a second mother to her. So, on the morning of the wedding, when Bimbo went to use the restroom, Tolani followed Mrs. Adesua's instructions. She applied the mysterious substance to Bimbo's wedding gown, thinking she was protecting her friend from harm. Tears streamed down Tolani's face as she recounted the events. I didn't know, she cried. I didn't know it would hurt her. I thought I was helping her, just like Wale's mother said. I'm sorry. Wale and Bimbo's mother were both stunned into silence. The revelation was too shocking to fully process. Wale could hardly believe that his own mother could be involved in such a wicked act, and Bimbo's mother was heartbroken to learn that Tolani, the girl she had always treated like a daughter, had unwittingly played a part in our child's suffering. Realizing that the situation was even worse than they had imagined, they knew there was only one person who could provide the final piece of the puzzle: Mrs. Adesua herself. Wale's anger and disappointment swelled within him as he left Tolani's house and headed back to confront his mother. When they arrived at Wale's family home, Mrs. Adesua was sitting in the parlor, sipping tea as if nothing was wrong. But when Wale stormed in, his face flushed with anger, she immediately knew that her secret was out. Mother? Wale began, his voice shaking with emotion. What have you done? Mrs. Adesua looked up at her son, her eyes narrowing as she placed her teacup down with a soft clink. What are you talking about, Wale? She asked, feigning ignorance. Wale's patience snapped. Don't play games with me, mother. Tolani told us everything. The substance you gave her to rub on Bimbo's dress. It's made her lose her mind. Why would you do such a thing? Mrs. Adesuwa's facade of innocence slowly crumbled. She sighed deeply, her expression shifting from one of denial to a cold resignation. I did what I had to do, she said quietly. I couldn't let you marry that girl. Wale stared at his mother in disbelief. You couldn't let me marry her. So you decided to ruin her life. To ruin my life? Don't be so dramatic, Wale. Mrs. Adesua replied, her tone icy. I was only trying to protect you. That girl doesn't belong in our family. She's not like us. She comes from nothing. She would only drag you down. I was trying to save you from making that terrible mistake. Wale's hands clenched into fists at his side, his anger burning hotter than ever. Bimbo is the woman I love. She's kind, caring, and everything I've ever wanted. And you, his voice broke, and he struggled to find the words. You've destroyed her. Just because she didn't come from a rich family? How could you be so heartless? Mrs. Adesua's gaze hardened. You are young, Wale. You don't understand how the world works. Marrying her would have been a disaster. For you, for our family. I did what was necessary to ensure your future. Wale shook his head, tears of frustration welling up in his eyes. You didn't ensure my future. You ruined it. You've ruined everything. He turned to his mother one last time, his voice filled with finality. I never want to see you again. With that, Wale walked out of the house, leaving Mrs. Adesua behind in stunned silence. Bimbo's mother followed, her heart heavy with sorrow for both her daughter and for Wale. They returned to Bimbo's house, where she was still locked in the room, laughing and crying to herself. Bimbo's mother couldn't bear to see her daughter like this any longer. She knew she had to find a way to reverse what had been done. She returned to the wise diviner. She recounted the confession and asked for his help. The diviner nodded gravely and told her that reversing the curse would be difficult, but not impossible. This is powerful magic, he said, but there is a way to undo it, though it will require great sacrifice and strength from those who truly love Bimbo. The diviner explained that Bimbo's healing would require a powerful cleansing ritual. He gave Bimbo's mother a list of ingredients to gather: sacred herbs, special oils, and objects of special significance to Bimbo, Wale, and even Tolani. The ritual would have to be performed at the first light of dawn, when the spirits were most active and the energies of the earth were at their strongest. Bimbo's mother, Wale, and even the repentant Tolani gathered everything the diviner had asked for. Together, they prepared for the ritual, praying that it would bring Bimbo back to them. They managed to take her down to the diviner. At the first light of dawn, they gathered around Bimbo, who had been placed in the center of a sacred circle drawn with white chalk on the floor. The diviner began chanting, his voice deep and resonant, as he sprinkled the herbs and oils over Bimbo. The air was thick with the scent of the sacred plants, and the atmosphere was charged with energy. As the ritual continued, Bimbo's wild laughter and incoherent muttering slowly began to fade. Her eyes, which had been clouded with madness, started to clear. The laughter turned into soft sobs and finally silence. When the ritual was complete, Bimbo lay still on the ground, her breathing calm and even. Her mother knelt beside her, gently brushing the hair from her face. Bimbo, my child, she whispered, her voice trembling. Can you hear me? Bimbo's eyes fluttered opened, and for the first time in days, she looked around with clarity. Mom, she murmured, her voice weak. What happened? Why am I here? Tears of relief streamed down her mother's face as she hugged her daughter tightly. You are safe now, my dear. Everything is going to be okay. Wale, who had been standing nearby, rushed forward and took Bimbo's hand. Bimbo, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice choked with emotion. This should have never happened to you. Bimbo looked up at him, her expression one of confusion. She didn't remember everything that had happened, but she could see the pain and sorrow in Wale's eyes. It's okay, Wale, she said softly. We are together now. That's all that matters. Just like that, the darkness that had plagued their lives began to lift. The ritual had worked, and Bimbo was finally free from the curse that had been placed upon her. But the scars of what had happened would remain with them all. In the weeks that followed, Bimbo and Wale talked about what had happened, and though it was painful, they decided to move forward together. Their love had been tested in the most unimaginable way, but it had survived. They knew that they would never forget what had happened, but they also knew that they had the strength to face whatever challenges the future might bring. As for Tolani, she was filled with guilt and regret for her part in the ordeal. She apologized to Bimbo and Wale, and though they were disappointed, but they eventually forgave her. Tolani knew that she had lost their trust, and she decided to excuse them and travel for a while to find herself and make amends for her actions. And Mrs. Adesua, she was left to reflect on the consequences of her actions. She had tried to control her son's life, believing that she knew what was best for him. But in the end, she had only brought pain and suffering to those she loved. Wale cut ties with her, and she was left alone to face the weight of her choices. But in time, Bimbo and Wale found happiness again. They married in a quiet, private ceremony, surrounded by those who truly loved and supported them. The journey had been long and difficult, but they had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. If you enjoyed this video, kindly like it, drop a comment, subscribe for more interesting stories than this, and share with your friends and family. See you in the next one. Goodbye.